Usually it works like a charm.
Oh, what'd you do? What did you do? You fixed it.
I hooked into the app.
That's it. We are on board, baby. Welcome today to this episode of DIY Bluegrass. We have a very special guest. Uh, so much history in this woman. You have done everything, and you're still doing more. So please welcome Valerie Smith.
Hello, how are you? Longtime friend.
I met you so many years ago when you were just hardcore touring on the circuit, and you were really making waves back then, and you still are absolutely pushing boundaries. I thought today was perfect to talk to you about how you built your own ecosystem within the bluegrass community. You did not wait for anybody to anoint you. You just completely created your own world. And I think that's fascinating for everyone to hear about. And thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being there throughout the years of my many different versions of Valerie Smith presentations. I had to build my own orb because I was so different. And a lot of people didn't understand what I was trying to do or why I was trying to do things a certain way. And when you don't fit into one category, then you have to have the attitude of if it's to be, it's up to me. And
Mm.
so you find your way and you don't, one thing I promised to myself, and not that I have every day is a great day and I'm not Mother Teresa every day, but I never got mad at people for rejection or for not understanding. I've always been kind of a different person, even as a kid. I always, you see gray, I see several different colors in that gray. And to me, it used to work against me because I didn't know how to hone that in. But as I got older, I learned that that was my path and that not to fight what your purpose is and to go forward with it and accept it and no resentment towards those around you, especially those that may not understand. Usually things that people don't understand that they're a little afraid of. And but I think at the end of the day, most of my decisions, and some things failed, some things didn't. I think people understood who I was and what my purpose was, and I think the doors began to open. And you know, people are reluctant for any kind of change or ingenuity sometimes because it means like, how is this going to affect me? And I wasn't out to affect anybody. I was just wanting to be a part of the community and make music and be honest about it and be who I was and just do it, in my way. For the what I had going on, I had to forge my own path. Some people don't have to do that, and I think that's great. I think there's many ways we can express ourselves.
Yes, you have such a uh, tremendous background in education with music as well, and you went to school for voice and music education, and that's kind of been the backbone of everything you've done since then. You were the
Oh,
first person to really treat the voice as its own instrument in bluegrass, I think.
yes, I didn't even know that I was approaching the industry with that. One of the very first shows my very first appearance at IBMA was in Louisville.
Hmm.
Right? It was in Owensboro, but Louisville was the place that really I started.
The Galt
And
House.
yeah, and I remember just not knowing the bluegrass community that well. I was new.
Yeah,
And I was from the Midwest, so I had no idea that there was like a whole culture around bluegrass.
right. Midwest
Um,
girls, you
yeah,
know,
and I didn't know that there was a female problem even. I was just that naive, going into it. And I remember I could play guitar, I could play mandolin, I could play fiddle, but I felt like my main instrument was voice. And I felt like that was honest. As a music teacher, I felt like I had so many amazing players around me that were just, they did not need my help. But they needed my help as an entertainer and as to keep the show going. And I was a school of dance person in the University of Missouri in Kansas City. So dance was a very big part of my presentation. And I almost can't sing without moving a foot.
Yeah.
And I just did what was honest, but I just remember that first showcase at IBMA, and Murphy Henry was trying so hard for the women in bluegrass, which I appreciate that, but I didn't know who she was. I did not know she had given this big speech before my presentation about why do women dance? Why are they always the bass player? I had a woman bass player. I danced. Why don't they play an instrument? I didn't bring an instrument on stage. Why do they always? And I really wasn't giving a political statement against what she had to say. That was just who I was. But my big question and comeback was, why do women have to be anybody for anyone? Why can't we be ourselves and choose?
Yeah.
We don't. Why do we have to wear a certain suit, an instrument? Isn't bluegrass for the people, for everybody, whether you're an entertainer, a singer, whether you play mandolin, fiddle, whatever? I didn't see the common sense behind that. And I knew there was going to be a lot of women and men behind me that were going to be a lot more vocal about entertaining and expressing themselves than I was. I was tame compared to that. And but poor Murphy, she just thought, this woman, she did this on purpose after my speech. For years, there was this big, debate. And I remember her asking me to write an article whether the voice was an instrument. And as a voice teacher, I just couldn't bring myself to defend myself on that, and to have to prove it was an instrument because I knew it was an instrument. I'd studied it in college. I paid a lot of money to get that education
So you
and
didn't write the article.
can major in voice. Yeah, and so I didn't write the article. It wasn't to be mean or cruel. It was just because I felt, and maybe I should have took that opportunity to write, why the voice is an instrument. But to me, it just felt like I was defending myself. And I've never been good at that. I've always been like, no, I did what I did and I did it because it felt right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. And so that was very early on in your career, and you went forward from that point, and you actually you arrived in Nashville at 23, 24 years old.
I think 24, it was in 96.
Yeah. And so what was that like back then for you?
It was scary. I mean, I was from a town of 300 people in the middle of nowhere, Midwest.
Yeah.
But my whole life, I'd walk out to our family farm and I had still do, severe dyslexia. And during my generation, my time, it was a very big mystery why people had dyslexia. They didn't have like these teachers that could, there was a few that could, but not where I was from. And I knew that my career choices were going to be very slim because of that problem. And I just used singing was something I could do. Writing was something I could do. And I would pray every day walking to my grandpa's farm. And I made a deal with God. I said, give me a chance to go to Nashville. Give me a chance to dive into the music business and learn everything that I'm passionate about. Give me a chance. I had a bucket list to at least sing on the Opry once. I'm good with that. At least sing at the Ryman once in the circle. I'm good with that. And I made all these negotiations with God. And I said, and once I do that, when it's time to walk away, I will understand that that's not who I am, that that's something I wanted to achieve. And I will walk away and I won't let it get to me and take me over. And that's hard to do once you get in the middle of things. It's hard to know when like you've hit your check marks. I mean, do you really need to do the Opry 5 times to feel like you achieved something? No. You had the experience, you have the t-shirt, you did it, next. And that was me. I was very simplistic in my view of things, probably to a point of, maybe that would be handicap with some people, but it wasn't to me because there's other things that I wanted to do. I wanted to do production. I wanted to do marketing. I wanted to do painting. I wanted to do movies. I wanted to, and so I had a very strict balance of bam, 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 and
So
I've
you
never
knew
regretted that.
very early on what you wanted to do, and you just had that path. So it's so fascinating to me that you became one of the first female-owned record labels, radio network thing, PR, I mean, everything. And you were one of the very first to do that. Uh, but that wasn't the beginning of the story. There was something that led you to creating your own ecosphere. And I think it started with the story. This is one of my favorite stories you've ever told me. It started with your record deal when you were that young girl
Yeah.
in Nashville. Tell me
And
about it.
I won't give names because I just,
You don't want to get
yes,
sued.
I did achieve a record deal in Nashville. I mean, I got to write, I got to write as a guest writer at, Forerunner, where Tim O'Brien was, and all these wonderful writers were, and Garth Brooks and Alan Reynolds. And I got to sneak in the door and co-write with them. And that was a great experience. And then that led me to a bigger community of the music industry. And so I got involved and it was fun. It was fun. The people were interesting to me. They were different. They were interesting. But I have this, I had done all this work towards this project. And I get in the office on 16th Avenue and the guy locks his door and just starts, blah. And I was in my early 20, I had never experienced that before. And I'm from tobacco farm, corn country, six male cousins. I'm a taunt girl kind of. And my first reaction was I felt threatened and I punched him in the nose and it broke his nose. And I remember thinking, I'm going to jail.
He attacked you.
Yeah, but there was no proof. It was in their office. Their build. I mean, the world was a different world in the 90s. I mean, late 90s in the music industry. If you were a newbie coming into this industry, you had no power at all. I mean, forget about it. And so I got pretty much blacklisted, but I had this dear friend named Nikki Mitchell who heard it off the street. And she worked for Waylon Jennings. And I used to kind of, at these songwriters' nights and stuff, I would kind of be an opening for Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash's son. And so I kind of knew the Outlaws. They were the friendliest people in town, actually. If you were a new person, they did not treat you that way. They welcomed everybody, and until you proved yourself to be if you proved yourself to be a jerk, then they kind of like, you know. But if they were the warmest people, but I remember going to Waylon's office, and he stared at me and looked at me and started laughing, and he said, "I just wanted to meet you." Because he didn't like this producer either. And he goes, "You're gonna have to start your own label. There's no way you're getting signed." So he said, "I just wanted to I wanted you to just cut corners and just know."
You're like, we've heard about you on the street.
Yeah.
Nobody messes with Valerie Smith.
And it ended up being a big laugh. And luck, I didn't get arrested. Now, the guy did call me and say, "This is over. We aren't talking about this anymore. We're done. This is over." I remember at the time I was working in a marketing agency, and I'm like, "I gotcha. Gotcha."
Oh, he locked the door. You were locked. He had the key. You couldn't get out.
Yeah. But he was
Oh.
more than happy to let a rabid dog out of the building. I am sure I could have handled that better, okay? But it was like second nature.
Awesome.
To this day, he probably has PTSD or something. I don't know.
Hey, maybe he doesn't do that anymore. Maybe he thinks twice before he locks the door.
I know. I'm not a person that's violent. I'm usually not. I don't go around hitting people and, rolling up my sleeves ready to fight. That's
Brass
not
knuckles.
my normal behavior. But in that case, I felt kind
It
of,
was warranted.
it felt warranted. I wasn't even mad. I was just more like shocked. It was like, ah.
Yeah. I love it.
Hello, 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 hello. Like, what do you say?
I love it. And so that pivotal moment, you probably didn't know it at the time, but that was the moment that you forged your path on your own record label, all these things we've been talking about. And I think what's so different and what I love about what you're doing is that it's a different kind of label than anybody else. Most people, they sign with a label, and don't get me wrong, the right record deal is amazing and it can skyrocket artists. But what you're doing is essentially you act as a label, uh, and you have publicity services that you offer as well. But this is like different in the way that artists retain all their rights. They're not selling their music, they're not selling their rights. You're not this big label that's just uh, obtaining the royalties forever. They maintain control over everything that they're doing. You're just acting as the backbone of a label, which I think is really cool because I don't think anybody else is allowing artists to, pay for PR, but maintain their own catalog. I think that's fascinating.
Well, I decided, at first I had the old business plan of Bell Buckle Records and of other labels, like how you do other labels. Um, I will tell you this, the day I will never forget, the day that you could burn a CD and that Napster came, I knew the business model was gone. I knew it was gone within just I knew it would be gone within 2 years. And I was sitting at this popular restaurant on 16th Avenue that all the big wheels eat at, and I just remember there was a part of me that felt freedom
Mm,
that but I mean there's good and bad to not having a gatekeeper. Not everything is perfect without gatekeepers, but I felt the reason why the gatekeepers kept the gate was awfully not good reasons, I mean, it was who's gonna be my friend and party, and to me that wasn't being a gatekeeper. And I remember looking at my then manager that I had hired to be my salesperson for Valerie Smith, a spokesperson. I looked at him and I said, I want to throw my plate off the table and I want to get on the table and do a buck dance and tell all these guys, it's over, it's over. And I said, but I didn't, but that's because I knew that that had opened doors for a lot of people that could not get through that wall for whatever reason. Um, does everybody deserve through the gate? No. But
yeah.
there are those that do and that should be heard. And for whatever weird reason, they weren't going to get heard. And I didn't like that. And I felt like, wow, look at this new technology, YouTube, Spotify. And I thought, I can release, and CD Baby was emerging, and they would come to IBMA early on and sell their packages. And I knew then that whether we all liked it or not, and I'm sure like other label people could debate with me and they would have extremely valid reasons, okay? Of course they would. But even with all those valid reasons, it is the way it is. And
Mhm.
we have to approach it the way it is because we're not going to change that now. That genie's out of the bottle. So at that point in my mind, I knew Bell Buckle Records could not be a true label. I knew we didn't have the catalog. I knew we didn't have I knew we didn't have all of the respect at that point. But
Mhm.
I knew that I could offer a service because I learned sales from a gentleman that owned a restaurant. And he said, it's a lot like selling hamburgers and barbecue, but you're dealing with humans. And and that was Jay Gregory Heineke, who owns the Bell Buckle Cafe. And a lot of people either loved him or hated him. There was no in between with that guy. But I saw the value in what he had to teach me about business, about selling hamburgers, barbecue, and food was a lot like selling music. You were trying to appease the public's taste and what they wanted and and so I connected the food business with music industry. I knew that what I needed to do was a service industry that was upfront, honest. I didn't want to keep their masters from my catalog. I
Yeah.
didn't want them to go belly up without, their ownership of their CD sales on the road. Now that meant they were going to have to work a little harder,
Hmm.
which I knew that they were going to have to anyway during that time because I could see it fast forward what this industry was going to do because of technology.
Oh, yeah.
And I could see the writing on the wall. And I knew one thing, I may have had dyslexia, but I was good at technology. And I worked with computers. I worked with stuff like that, cameras. And I just knew what the abilities of people, the minute we had this in our own hands,
Hmm.
the industry had changed. The old record label setup of I give you a deal, you pay me back what I put into you. You do shows, I get a percentage. And that was the right way to do it then because usually there was a person putting the money up front for them and they had to recoup. But in this case, there wasn't really a reason to put that much money up front when you were just going to get pennies back. Music turned into a business card. The
Yeah.
live shows was what was going to make you money.
Yes.
And if you were good on content creation, eventually that will help pay a lot of your bills. So you had to learn how to I wanted to teach people that found the system just a little different or too hard for them. I wanted to teach them how to be their own record label from within and give them that hope. And the whole slogan was, if it is to be, it's up to me. And if they didn't see their careers that way, then it was really up to them.
I love that. That is perfect. I want that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, it's a good saying. Stuck with me my whole career,
Yeah,
you know.
because I think a lot of people they sign up and they think that they're going to take care of it for them, and they are simply going to help you. They're not going to drive the ship. Um,
Mm.
and that's really important. So what would you tell a young artist? What would you tell 25-year-old Valerie if she was emerging right now in 2026?
Well, number one, I would tell her not to change a thing, except continue to learn everything you can about technology, learn everything you can about history, music history, what has and what is no longer. And I do everything in patterns. So I would tell young Valerie to not trust everybody, that it's a business and people usually, if they're offering you something, there's something in it for them.
Hmm.
And to find out and there's nothing wrong with that either, as long as you understand what's in it for them and that everything's upfront, honest. And if that person can't tell you that upfront, then you probably should move along. Uh, there's nothing wrong with business deals and people saying, I expect this, I expect that, I want to make this, I'm hoping to get this out of working with you. I have no problem with that. The problem is when people aren't always honest and won't be upfront and tell you upfront. You can't help them if you don't know what they're wanting.
Hmm.
And some people's purposes have been sinister a little bit. Some people's are not.
Hmm.
And I would tell Valerie not to be delusional, and that to take one day at a time and that to treat it like a job. You have to work every day. If this is what you want to do, you should be working every day. You should be practicing your instrument every day. You should be writing every day. You should be doing your marketing every day. It's a job. And if you want to see it succeed, you have to understand that. You get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, you do your job.
Yeah. And
You,
trust your gut. You have to trust your gut in all those situations because there have been so many times like this one thing happened. It was and I won't name names, but I had my last full album out and it was getting traction and it was getting some attention. And it was a major PR firm. You can probably guess who it was. They are no longer operating, but they were probably like one of the biggest in town in Nashville. So I got invited to the office to talk to them, and they wanted me to sign up with them. And I don't know how to describe it, but it was like the darkest atmosphere. All of the workers seemed scared. There was this heavy energy. It was kind of really weird. And I listened to what they had to say. And I was just like kind of non-committal. I'm like, okay, well, I'll think about it. And then he shifted and he started kind of trying to be like, well, you know what? If you don't take advantage of this right this minute, your 5 minutes of fame will be over. And it's like,
wow.
I guess then it's over. I don't really care. But I'm not going to sign up with somebody with mobster tactics. And it's like, you can just turn like that on somebody. And so I didn't sign up with them. And within a few years, it came out that there was tons and tons of allegations of horrendous abuse with this individual on employees, on artists. It was it was horrible. And so I
You
just
missed you missed a bullet.
yeah, I just think trust your gut. If the energy is not feeling right, run.
Yeah. Yeah, trust your instincts. Let's say your instincts are wrong. Still, you don't like it, so it's over.
Hmm.
If you don't, there's not a lot of connection there, you're going to be stuck with these people for a long time.
Hmm.
And if you're already getting this dark connection with them, you're not going to be able to follow through to the final point with them because it takes a tremendous amount of trust to bring somebody into your fold, into your career. They need to love your career as much as you love theirs. When I'm working with an artist, I make sure I don't have any major Valerie Smith projects going on or coming out, or I always schedule mine when nobody else is releasing their stuff because I know as somebody that is marketing and managing, I need to love their career as much as they love their career at that time.
Hmm.
And that's the promise that I feel in that position one should make
Hmm.
because these are people's lives you're dealing with. You're not just dealing with music. This is their heart, their soul, their dreams, their ambitions. That's a lot, and that should be important to the person listening to you about what you want to happen in your career.
Oh yeah, you have brought so many artists to me over the years that I've ended up working with through Bluegrass today. And it's been so incredible to watch the transformation. There's been so many bands I can't even count that you've brought over and they have just their careers have taken off. They went from being a hobby band to being played on coast to coast. It's really incredible the work you do with people and the way you mentor them and bring them along and make them the best that they can be. You know, maybe they don't start off as the most amazing thing in the world, but you bring out the best in them, and that's what we're all trying to do here. So I know we've only got a few minutes left. I want to talk about your latest project. I'm so inspired with this. It's very incredible. It's the story about your great grandmother, right? And the diaries that you found in an attic, detailing her life, her escape from an abusive marriage. And from that was the story of the song that we wrote together, A Dollar Looked Mighty Good, when she first started making some independent cash. And that was a great song. I loved working on that. But from that, you have just gone a route that I don't think anyone other than Dolly Parton has done with a Broadway show or a theater like show.
Again, I always think a little bit outside the box, and sometimes I'm a little bit like Forrest Gump, and I just go where my instincts tell me to go, and I'll figure it out along the way why I feel like I need to do this. But I this is this is my Maggie. She may be backwards. I don't know if they're doing it this way. But this is Maggie right there. And every time you see the project, you see her face, not mine. Because this is her story, and this is from her journal, and this is her life. And she's my great grandmother out of Missouri. And my cousins found they found the old journal this is her in her younger years. They found an old journal of hers in the attic in a trunk. And they got the journal out, and they thought they were going to be reading Little House on the Prairie. We all do in the Midwest. You're like, oh, it must be a little like Little House on the Prairie. And it wasn't. Life was pretty hard, much harder back in those days than it is now. But she talked about her mother not really liking her, wanting to get her out of the house really bad, just get rid of her. She was abused, but back then they didn't know what abuse was. It's not like you had schools and colleges telling people in the Midwest post Civil War, like, well, this is called this, or this is, people lived every day of their life to survive and find food and to, keep warm in their houses. They didn't have the luxury to worry about the psyche of the mind. They never even thought about it. They said, look, this is how you do it. And if you don't, you could get your rear end whipped, I guess. But
And there was
uh,
a pivotal moment when she had endured so much
yeah,
from her husband that it was down to life and death, and she pulled a gun on him, right?
yeah, she said, I will stand no more. I wrote a song and did not put that in the project, which part of me feels like it should have been in the project, but it's I will stand no more is what she said. And she picked up the two revolvers and she pointed it at him. She had a crippled child in the house that was going to die soon, but she had to escape and she pointed the gun at him. She didn't shoot him, but she ran out and she had to run in the snow like forever to get to her sister's house and then her mom's house. That she went back with the revolvers to get the baby, got the baby, and the baby did die. But after that, she started selling, like, I think it was Watkins products in a wagon, and she would wheel around the last child she had through that marriage, selling things, doing laundry for people, cleaning, and eventually she owned a general store and a hotel and
She got
was
remarried. She had more healthy kids.
yeah, then she had my grandma Frances. That's the
Wow.
reason why I'm here. And she talks about having no education and feeling like she had no purpose. And that just tore me apart because I thought if she only knew by saving her life and forging on the human beings that survive today because of her.
Yeah.
There'd be no David Stevens, there would be no Valerie Stevens or Valerie Smith to create music and change the way, the world kind of looks at things somewhat in my own little pocket of the world. And there would be no, I have cousins that help children that are, they do so much for the community. And I'm thinking, we just don't know what our purpose is sometimes, even to our death. And so we just have to do the very best we can to live a beautiful life, just like the song. Each day I'll do golden deed, helping those who are in need. My life on earth is but a span, so I'll do the best I can. And that's my favorite song.
That's great. That's great. Wow. Thank you, Valerie. This was incredible. I think we know where you got all of your spirit and grit. It sounds like it's genetic.
Maybe a little. There's that side look.
Just the best of wishes to all of your projects, all of your artists. Thank you for sharing some wisdom and some fun and some laughs with us today.
Yeah.
You're an inspiration. Thank you so
But
much.
you are too. Look at you.
I'm having fun.
You never worked inside the box either.
No, I decided that control over my art was more important than money. So I just
Kindred spirits.
yes. Yes. You take care, girl.
Okay, you have a good one.
You too.
Okay,
Bye bye.
bye.